Good evening and welcome to the Silicon Valley Entrepreneur, a series of conversations with startup founders and the investors who fund them. Today I'm delighted to have with us Mark Goldenson from Breakthrough.com. And Mark, pleasure to see you here. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thanks very much for having me.
Now, you're the founder and CEO of Breakthrough.com. Can you tell us a little bit about what Breakthrough.com is and what it does?
Sure. So Breakthrough.com is a platform for online counseling. We connect people with mental health providers through secure video, phone, email, and chat. And the problem is that we're trying to solve is that 1 in 4 Americans, 58 million people, have a mental illness, depression, anxiety, PTSD, ADHD, eating disorders. These are our parents, our siblings, our kids who have these kind of things. And even though counseling has been shown to help 90% of the time, 2/3 of people with these conditions do not get any treatment. And there are 4 major reasons for this. It's the high cost of counseling, low access, inconvenience, and stigma. And what's interesting is that we think the internet can help address all 4 of these problems. It can reduce costs anywhere between 10 to 50% because of reduced overhead. It can expand the pool of providers that people can access. It can make it a lot more convenient because you can go to counseling anywhere where there's phone or internet access. And it can reduce stigma because you can do this confidentially, even anonymously. So we're really excited to provide something that can not only do well as a business, but do good.
So how did you come to think of doing this? Because this is a little bit unusual from the usual, let me go and do an iPhone app.
Sure.
This sounds quite complex. How did you decide to go and do this?
Right. Well, it's a merging of my backgrounds in psychology and mental health and internet entrepreneurship, which I think is not unusual. I think a lot of entrepreneurs do pursue something that is close to them. For me, I had been a researcher at Stanford in the Stanford psychology department for 4 years. The whole reason I came out to Stanford was actually to do research on what's called lucid dreaming, which is dreaming while knowing you're dreaming. And I could go off on 2 hours of that, but I won't.
Okay.
But it's a fascinating topic.
Right.
And I just quickly decided that I am not a good researcher. You have to go deep into a topic versus go broad. But I've always been interested in it. I had counseled teens. I had counseled veterans. I was a neuroscience major. So when I went into internet entrepreneurship, and I've been doing that for about 12 years, I didn't do as much on the psychology side. So when I was looking for a new startup to do a year ago, I was interested in what is at the intersection of psychology and the web. And I think the number one answer is online telemedicine. I think for a lot of medical fields, delivery of healthcare in some form is going to be online. What's interesting about mental health, actually 2 interesting things. One is that out of all medical fields, it is the one most suited to being delivered on the web because the primary treatment is communication between a therapist and the patient. And the second is that it is uniquely suited to reducing the stigma of mental illness because you can do it confidentially or even anonymously.
Okay, so you touched a little bit on your background as to how you got to doing this. Tell us a bit more about that because, all right, you started out doing some research in this area, then you went off, you say, for 12 years into the internet. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so just my background.
Yeah.
So I had been interested in research for a while, and the last field that I wanted to get into was business because coming into school, I thought, well, you have to be seedy and unsavory to do business, right? You have to cheat and steal and such. So I thought I wanted to live in an ivory tower. And around the dot-com boom around 1998, everyone was starting a company on campus. So a friend had seen that I had started the squash team on campus and thought, okay, maybe he has some entrepreneurial ability and he can help us on the operational side. So he had an idea for creating a online storefront for small businesses because about 50% of businesses, 60% employ all American jobs, about 60% of GDP, but very few had small business storefronts. So we tried to create that. And it was a great idea. We raised $21 million. We were a finalist in the Stanford Entrepreneurial Challenge. and we made every rookie mistake that you can possibly make. We had too many founders, we overraised money, we didn't deliver enough product. So I went back to school. I actually ended up dropping out of Stanford twice to do startups. But and the first experience was just loving that experience of creating something that can have value and that, yes, you can make money in, but is really a mission. So I went on to do co-found a marketplace for Stanford called the Stanford Bazaar, which was eventually acquired by Stanford, and then dropped out for a second time to join PayPal around 2002 as a product manager. So I don't know that it was a straight linear line from where I was to what I'm doing now, but I've enjoyed kind of every step, and now I see how those early mistakes, I've learned a lot from them, and I think made me a better entrepreneur for it.
Okay. So you had the idea to start Breakthrough.com. What were some of the early steps you did? Things like, how did you find the rest of the founders? How did you build a team? How did you get it going?
Right.
Who were going to be your customers? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I have benefited a bit from that experience and knowing what I was looking for. And one thing I was looking for was to try and set a very high bar for the early team, because I do think that sets the later culture. Generally, the best people want to be around the best people. So if you get a mediocre team because they're cheap or because they're the only ones who can get or so on, then even if you excite people with your idea and any some traction later on, they generally want to work with the best people. So I spent 3 months looking for the ideal co-founders, and eventually we found a development team that had that was experienced in Ruby on Rails, which is this engineering platform that allows very rapid development. They had actually built one of our competitors before us. They were willing to accept a large part of their compensation in equity. They were generally smart guys. So that all played into the decision. And so we pushed out our beta site in 11 weeks on $50,000 in credit card debt. We had been trying to get a great domain for about 3 months, and eventually did get Breakthrough.com, which has been a huge boon to us. We launched at TechCrunch 50, which is the prominent tech conference for launching startups from the TechCrunch, the major technology blog. And since then, we've been iterating the site and now have some great sales traction, usage, and things look good.
Okay, so you were a sole founder and you got a team, or did you have any other co-founders?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are, of course, early people who are contributing. I think my case is a little unusual because I suppose I was the sole founder. That I think it is more typical to find a tech person and a salesperson or two tech people. Part of it was I was really looking for that sole co-founder, but this was around April or so of last year, and a lot of the people I think who were interested were needing a salary because it was so hard to find people who could go work out the salary. So I did find some people, but I didn't think that their background was the exact fit that I was looking for. And so I found a team that I think was a good fit for what we're looking for. And I guess you could consider them early employees or early co-founders, but they've been great for us. And as is everyone else that I've been working with. Mazu Samuelson, who was a product manager from LinkedIn, fellow Stanford grad, was great for us early on, and several other people.
Okay. Now, I know you were able to raise some venture capital fairly early on. How did you go about doing that, and at what stage of the company did you decide to go and look for venture capital?
Right. So I think we could have raised a little early on, but it would have been on terrible terms. So I was more willing to go into debt for a short period, $50K, and build out the site, because what I think people, new entrepreneurs may not appreciate is that your valuation goes up dramatically early on at small steps. So if you are a guy and a gal in a garage and you have an idea and nothing else, then your valuation might be zero and might be 50,000, 100,000. If you can get out a simple alpha, then your valuation might double or triple. If you can get a beta with more features and actual users, then your valuation will double again. If you get your first sales contract, it doubles again until you're looking at $4 or $5 million valuation to invest terms on with a relatively short amount of time, 3 to 6 months. So I didn't think it made sense to go out for money, and I was willing to kind of go all in on my savings in order to make this happen. And I didn't really have a lot because I'd been an entrepreneur for a long time now. I haven't had a market salary since my days in PayPal, which is almost 10 years now. So I knew that was the better way to go, both in terms of equity, but of also not having too much interference early on, really executing the vision of the early people. So once we felt like we had the right business model, then I went out to get some funding to grow the team and really invest in development. So now we have over $200,000 in funding from Charles River Ventures. Sargur has been a great partner for us there, and other top angels. And we actually have several other VC firms that have said they'll be coming in.
Okay, so take me back to what was your funding strategy? How did you figure out which VCs to approach? In fact, VCs rather than angels, or how did you go about figuring out where you should go, when you should go to them, who you could connect to, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
What was the strategy that you worked on?
Right. Well, there's a few different criteria that we thought about. One is, what were the best partners for us? And we are at this intersection of healthcare and the web. And it is challenging to find investors that are comfortable with that intersection. Healthcare investors tend to be more focused on biotech, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, while internet investors tend to focus on consumer applications.
Mm-hmm.
We are a bit unique in that we have a consumer application, breakthrough.com, that people can go to find a therapist, but we also have a white label technology that we sell to mental health organizations, schools, health plans, prisons, military units, clinics, and that is actually the part of our business that is growing faster. So you need investors who are willing to invest in what might be considered more of a B2B, business-to-business sales plan. So when you try and combine healthcare and internet and B2B and say which investors are interested in that, it's a smaller pool than the typical investors for, say, a mobile application or your typical online, say, marketplace. So what we did is we looked at what investors, A, did I know and respect, and again, I think this is where my experience has helped me to know who are the investors I think who really add value and would get this. And second, who has an experience investing in healthcare? And so we look at comparable companies, see who has funded them, and as long as there isn't any red flags around them, would talk with them about possibilities. But I think finding a good partner is pretty important. That said, I would also say I tend to believe that the primary thing that investors can add overall is the funds that help grow the company. And I think some entrepreneurs might overvalue what investors can add in terms of other non-monetary assets. And that's the one thing I expected early on in my first experience, that investors would be able to add a whole ton of value beyond the money. And sometimes they can, but I wouldn't optimize my evaluation too much on that.
Right. And I know you said you ended up with Charles River Ventures. Can you tell us about how you approached them and how many other firms or angel groups you pitched along the way before you were successful in raising money? Right.
So I had known Sargur from before, and I think that is a common story of knowing your investors beforehand. And I think it's actually a good one, because what I like to do is, even if I'm meeting an investor for the first time, is I prefer to lay the groundwork of the relationship. Instead of going in and saying, I want money immediately, I would say, here's what this company is about, here's what I'm about as an entrepreneur, and ideally, here's what I want to commit to you to finish in 3 to 6 months. And then I'm going to come back to you in 3 to 6 months, and then we can talk about funding. Now, not everyone can be in a situation like that to say, well, I'm going to wait 3 to 6 months fundraise, but I think that's an ideal way to do it, because it shows empathy for the investor. The investor's risk early on is typically, is this team capable of doing what they say they can?
Absolutely.
If you buy into the market, the product, the competition, which are all kind of theoretical things, but once you buy into the idea, the investor's dilemma is, do I trust this team? Is this the best team I can find to do this? And I think as an entrepreneur, what we can do is say, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to set out and commit to you, and then I'm going to prove it. So that's what I like to do. And I'd known Sar a little from before, so I think he knew my background a bit. And I was fortunate now to have some investors from my previous venture come into this one, because then, even though that venture did not do that well, I think they saw that we tried well, we executed well, and now I'm thankful that they're coming in again.
Okay. So you had the idea, you were able to find a team, particularly to help you with the website. You've got some money. How did you put together, I mean, this sounds like, because you've got the psychology side, the website, and how did you pull together a product you could take to either the consumers or the white label users?
Right. Well, I'd love to say that I had a business plan that predicted all this a year down the road, but it wasn't like that. I did do about 2 to 3 months of research to understand why had this idea not reached fruition? Why wasn't there a leader in this field already in 2010? Because I don't think we have that significant of a technical barrier. It's a challenge to make it secure, HIPAA compliant, which are the laws around delivering healthcare information online. But it's not as complex as, say, starting a unique, compelling search engine, for example. So I was confused by that. And so I talked with the founders of most of the previous companies that tried to do what we're doing. And I asked, what mistakes did you make? Why do you think that you didn't reach success? And that was very informative. We learned all these reasons why previous companies had failed. They didn't focus sufficiently on businesses, which in our area have an incentive to market our service on our behalf because they can bring their populations in. For example, I can announce we have signed an agreement with Stanford's Peer Counseling Center. We will be serving 20,000 Stanford students. About 10% of the Stanford student population goes to counseling. So Stanford's Peer Counseling Center has an incentive to market us for us. If you try and go directly to Stanford students, there's no in-between to market you. And many of these organizations will pay you for delivering the service. So it's kind of, they'll market you and then they'll pay you.
That's a good deal.
It's a good deal. Right? Now, the trade-off is you have a sales cycle. That's maybe 3 to 6 months.
Yep.
But I think that's one that's worth taking on. That was another thing, is that previous companies had not been sufficiently capitalized. A lot of them were clinician-founded and not technologist-founded. And there have been some market enablers, like the Healthcare Reform Bill, the Mental Health Parity Act, other things that are stimulating this kind of idea. So I think the timing for this is right now.
Okay. So there must have been challenges along the way from the concept to where you are now. Can you talk about some of the challenges and how you overcame them?
Yeah. Well, I think it is hard to get by on a shoestring budget. It's fun. It can feel like a pirate ship sometimes, but there are definitely cases where we collectively were saying, gosh, if we had just had 50,000 more, look how much more we could deliver. And I still think that's the case. We have tried to be really cost efficient. I think in healthcare, it's not viral. Particularly in mental health, we're antiviral. People don't want to talk about going to a counselor or therapist. We're better now about stigma today than we were, say, 50 years ago, but it's still a challenge. And that's one reason that we are focusing a bit more on selling to businesses. Again, the health plans, for example, that would pitch us to their populations. We have Breakthrough.com for the direct-to-consumer channel, but that will take some time to grow out. And that was something that I had to accept early on, that I was not going to be working on the next version of Twitter that's going to reach 1 million users in a year. I think there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are pursuing those ideas that can grow virally but are clones of other companies. We wanted to build something valuable, something with a business model, which I think is now back in vogue, fortunately. And when I looked at all the traits that I wanted in an idea, this hit a lot of them. But I accepted that there were going to be challenges, like we were going to do a sales cycle. We were going to be in an antiviral market. It was going to take a few years to get to where we wanted to go. And I was comfortable with that. Even though I generate lots of ideas, I was comfortable that this is an idea that I thought I would be waking up 5 years from now and still excited to do.
So when you started this, did you think it would be a viral market? Because that is probably the most common marketing strategy that I see from the entrepreneurs in the Web 2.0 or next generation internet space. It'll go viral.
Yeah.
And you have to make things go viral for a start. It doesn't happen naturally. And you've now got an antiviral one.
Right.
If you've got, when you say you have a consumer component to it, so direct to the consumer side, how does the consumer even get to know that you exist? Right.
Well, that's why I think that the business to consumer application in our case will grow slower. And you can do typical marketing techniques. I think it's important to properly define what viral means, because I think it's become a misused term. The original definition, I think the more useful definition of viral marketing, is using the product or service inherently markets it to other people.
Yes.
And the canonical example is Hotmail. By using Hotmail, they had a little signature at the bottom of the Hotmail email that said, sign up for your free Hotmail account today, something like that. So you could not use Hotmail without marketing it to other people. Then there's PayPal is another example, where when you sent a PayPal payment to someone, if they were not signed up with PayPal, they had to sign up for PayPal in order to use the service. And that would be considered an even stronger version of virality because you've got money waiting versus just exposure viral marketing where Hotmail, I might see it, but I don't have to sign up for Hotmail in order to read your message. That would be a bad marketing technique. So we understood that virality for the most part was not something we were going to be able to bake into our product properly, with one exception actually, and it's one I'm very excited about, which is group counseling. So in about 2 months, we're going to launch HD group counseling on the site. Well, we've already talked with people who want to run AA style and other style group counseling sessions. It could be a provider, or it could be one person who might have a condition that wants to bring in an existing group or other people that they know. So they might come and just join a group, and that's fine. But if I already lead, say, an AA group, and I want to see the people in my group more often because we're all busy, this could be a good way for me to bring my group onto the site. So you can consider it maybe word of mouth. I don't know if it's viral because in order to do the service, I need to join the site. But that's one of the few ways. Otherwise, I think it is word of mouth. But I think, again, going to the organizations, like, for example, we are about 75% of the way to a signed contract with the largest health plan in the country because they know they want to get into telemedicine. They have 43 million patients. So if they sign on, not only are they going to pay us, they're going to market us to 43 million patients. That's great version marketing. It's going to be, that can get to 1 million users faster than a lot of consumer apps would, even though they're viral.
Okay. So going back to the service a little bit that you do. So you saw a need. You had the experience from your past internet experience to say, okay, we can deliver something over the internet. How is this actually delivered to a user? So let's say I'm feeling despair, I'm despondent or something, and I might go to my local Kaiser or something.
Right.
What's the difference in coming to your website?
Sure. Right. Well, so I can describe the experience, but I think it's worth mentioning up front. We don't see this as a replacement for in-person counseling, even though there's actually 30 years of research that shows that telemedicine and distance counseling is as effective as in-person, which was actually a bit counterintuitive to me beforehand. I was actually a bit skeptical. Will this really work? 'Cause I didn't want to be in the business of selling something that isn't work. So I went through all the research and found that it does indeed work as well, particularly in mental health, because again, the communication is the treatment a lot of the time. So we wanted to try and bring as much of the in-person experience we could while enhancing while we could online. For example, offering anonymity for those providers that were comfortable with that and those clients that wanted it. So, and I would say second, online I think is best for those people who don't have the time, the money, the ability, or the will to do in-person. We think if people have the time, money, and ability and will, in-person is generally best, but a lot of people don't. And so rather than say, no, you have to come in person, and if you don't have those 4 things, you're not going to get care, we'd rather say, well, here's a intermediary solution, which can work just as well as in person, and maybe is a gateway for you to get in-person help. So what is this experience like? People come to Breakthrough.com or to a private label site that Breakthrough.com is powering. They can search for a provider. They don't have to sign up for an account at that stage. They can filter on a variety of criteria by specialty, gender, price range, location, and there are these profiles for every provider that's signed up that give a lot more information than you can get in the Yellow Pages or Yelp. You can see a video introduction to get a sense of what is my counselor going to be like without having to pay the $100 or $120 an hour you might pay in a retail situation and realize, no, the fit isn't quite there. We have the rates, the mediums that providers offer, a full description of their summary, and so on. And it's great for the providers because a lot of providers are not the most tech savvy, so this is a way for them to put up a free website. So once a client finds the right provider for them, they can schedule an appointment, have the appointment, and then they can follow up in person or continue to see each other online via video or phone or email or chat. It's up to them.
Okay, so I could have a service, I could have somebody who wants to work with me based out of Oregon.
Yeah.
I need not have to leave the comfort of my own home, and I could do it with video chat and other things to have that there.
Yes, there's one important qualification, and again, this goes back to what I think previous companies have done wrong. One, there are several companies out there that do not restrict providers on a license basis. So there's this concept of cross-border counseling, meaning the provider is not licensed in the client state. I won't get too deep into the legal issues there. It looks like that would not be a problem according to law, but it's kind of a gray area. And so we had this interesting internal question of, okay, no provider has seemed to be successfully litigated against by practicing across states, but do we want providers to take that risk? And we eventually decided, it was a hard decision, no, we're going to, for Breakthrough.com, say that providers must be licensed in the client state. And it's just unfortunately where healthcare law is today. I fully expect somewhere between 3, 5, 7 years from now that the federal government and state governments will see that there's a lot of benefit to saying that a patient can see a provider anywhere in the country, maybe anywhere in the world, because it so deepens the pool that patients can see. But in the meantime, we don't want providers to feel that they need to take a risk in order to join our service. So we say providers must be licensed in the client state for Breakthrough.com. And then organizations that buy our technology can make a decision whether or not that's where they want to be or not. So it does limit the pool of providers that, say, someone in California could see, but a provider can always get licensed in California, and that's actually what a lot of providers do, is they get licensed in multiple states, generally larger states, and then can see people anywhere. So telemedicine is absolutely legal in all 50 states. And another thing that's exciting is that the reimbursement is starting to come, and that's another key market enabler that we saw. So we think that the wrong strategy is to require patients to spend and fully out of pocket. We actually integrate with insurance. So if you have an insurance and your insurance is in a certain state that requires reimbursement or has said they will reimburse on counseling, which is increasingly happening, then you can pay your usual copay or maybe nothing at all. Like Stanford students, they have their counseling covered for by the Peer Counseling Center, so they can come for free. That's a huge difference from asking someone for $100 an hour.
So it sounds like you've got a model that could be replicated across other areas. Do you have any plans to replicate once you've, more consolidated your advantages here?
Other plans for other types of service? Yeah, we are looking at coaching, for example, which you can consider counseling, bringing someone from a suboptimal state, some condition to feeling normal, and coaching you might be defined as bringing someone from feeling normal to an optimal condition, really trying to be the best dad they can be or best executive or so on. So I think coaching is very interesting, but I think a key thing with startups is really focusing, and we would rather be a leader in the fields that we've chosen than get scattered, because it can be very easy, especially if you're in a promising field like we are, to want to do lots of things simultaneously, and we try to stay focused. So I think coaching is interesting. There are other medical fields we can eventually use the technology for, but therapy is a $21 billion market, and there's a wide expectation that a lot of that is going to happen remotely in the near future. So I'm satisfied with our business potential where it is right now.
Okay. There's a lot more we could talk about. Unfortunately, we're beginning to run out of time. So are there any last words of wisdom you'd care to offer the entrepreneurs out there watching the show?
Yeah, I think this is a great job for people who are driven and want to make a difference. I think a lot of entrepreneurs can get caught up in the money that you can make, and there is a lot of money that you can make, but I think this is a great way to do what you love. It doesn't feel like work most days.
That's terrific. Mark, thank you very much indeed for your time. Do appreciate it.
Sure.
So it's thanks again to Mark for being on the show, and it's good night from the Silicon Valley entrepreneur, and I look forward to seeing you all again next month. Thanks and good night.